There are miracles going on all around you. My friend, the late Willis Hirschberger from Elkhart Valley, used to tell me that when he was a kid, they'd go to be a big deal to hitch up the wagons and go to downtown Elkhart to do some shopping. And if you heard somebody playing live music, you walked over and listened, and you didn't take it for granted. There was no radio. There was no recorded music. The records were pretty hard to operate, and most people didn't have a record player. You realized what a gift you were being given by live music, and I certainly enjoyed the gift being given just now, and there at the organ and the piano and everything else that goes on here. I appreciate the miracle of folks being able to make it to church, of children coming forward. There is something miraculous happening. For instance, every one of you who couldn't find a good reason to be on vacation, and God bless vacations because you need to get away from time to time, somehow made it here. People with grief, people with sorrow, people with sleepiness, people feeling so good they couldn't see why they shouldn't just stay home, put up their feet, and look at the Sunday paper. They're all here. It's a miracle. If we could bring up our short slideshow, but we don't appreciate the miracle that happens in our midst. And be lifted up, O ancient doors, said the psalm we were just reading and sharing together. Those ancient doors have to come from somewhere, and we're going to see in just a second. But let's get the first slide. That's a picture drawn by Kerman Thomason, the former editor of Messenger, for my book, Brethren Brush with Greatness. When they asked Kerman to draw illustrations, he said no. Then he said, okay, I'll work on a cover. Then he said, oh, I'll do maybe 5 pictures for the inside. And then he ended up doing a picture for every single story because he had so much fun drawing. This is for William H. Reinhardt. And this is a picture of William H. Reinhardt, 1825 to 1874. A member of the Church of the Brethren you don't know anything about. And the world knows about him, and I imagine you don't even appreciate him. Go ahead, next slide. He was a sculptor. He created over 100 pieces of sculpture, over 30 bas reliefs. That's a picture of him in the upper left-hand corner that he made of himself as a bas relief. And as a boy, he was not strong enough for farming. He didn't do good in school and was kicked out. But one day his father sent him over to the marble quarry that he had on the property to at least help with some of the gravestones, and they discovered that he did have a talent. The problem was, in America in the early 19th century, this was not considered a talent. This was considered a waste of time. There was no appreciation in the Brethren community particularly, or in America in general, for a person who could do something like this. Next slide, please. Two of the things you might have seen if you've been to Washington, D.C. is this is his door for the Senate chamber, and next, his door for the House chamber. And each one he has 4 scenes of war, 4 scenes of peace. But he created these, and it's one of the few times he came to America to do work, because what do we need a sculptor for? What good is it? Final picture. One of his most famous is of his Dunker mother, his Brethren mother, wearing her bonnet. And just a reminder that here is this miracle worker who can take a block of marble and do something like this. And I know a sculptor will tell you, well, it's not that hard. All I did was chip away the parts that didn't look like my mom. And I was left with this. But it's awfully hard. That goes for our live musicians. That goes for our storytellers. That goes for everybody who cut up vegetables or fruit for this morning. That goes for anybody that's been helping out in the garden. That goes for everyone who's been working on this play. That goes for every card that has been written, every phone call that has been made, every hug that has been shared. There are miracles going on, and I sometimes think we don't appreciate it enough. Thank you for the slideshow. Well, I'm sure it's not just brethren who don't appreciate the miracle in their midst. Amos is not appreciated either. He is an honest-to-goodness, sure enough, prophet. Now, he, like many brethren, wouldn't want to take credit for it, and he certainly wouldn't take credit. But the passage read today is preceded by 2 visions. In the first vision, in response to Israel's sinfulness and unwillingness to worship their God, in response to the injustice of the rich taking advantage of the poor, taking their land and their money. And this is what Amos came to preach against, coming up from the southern kingdom of Judea, going north to Israel to prophesy. In the first vision in chapter 7, we see the locusts laying waste, and Amos says they can't stand that. And God says, I will not do it. And in the second vision, fire sweeps the land, leaving everything bare. And Amos asks, how can the people endure that? And God relents again. God said, will not do this thing. God repents of this thing. But the people continue to take advantage of the weak and the marginalized and the suffering and the struggling, which leads to this third vision. And God says, Amos sees God standing on a tin wall. And God says, what am I holding? It says God is holding a lump of tin, or a plum weight. And Amos says, I see a lump of tin. And God says, and the word tin sounds a lot like the word of grieving or suffering. 2 strikes, this is the third strike. I'm not going to pass by them again. There has to be a response to the fact that those who are powerful fail to see that I am in the small and the weak and the suffering. Those who could do something turn their backs on them. It's a telling week when the Pope is labeled the most dangerous man in the world by a particular news service because he's been following the gospel of Jesus Christ and calling us out for our sins against the poor, against indigenous people. That makes him public enemy number 1. Well, this is a tough word then that Amos is giving in response to the fact that the people don't know a miracle's happening. And that leads Amaziah, who we don't know anything about, but who is a priest in the northern kingdom of Israel, so his temple, his altar is in Bethel, to tell the king, Amos has been conspiring, and the word is about political conspiracies meant to kill and overthrow. Amos has not said a word about overthrowing the king. He has been calling the king back to justice. He has been calling the king back to his job. But here comes this false accusation. And so Amaziah comes to him and says, go back to the south. You know, this is the big city up north. We here in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, we here in Elkhart don't need a prophet from Napanee to tell us what to do. Go back to Napanee. And this leads Amos to say, well, I'm not a prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. I'm not a professional at this. When he says that he tends sycamore trees, what he does is there is a fruit that is small and hard and that nobody wants, so the poor get to eat it. And what he's been doing, this sounds funny, I'm sorry, this is the literal translation. He is a fig slitter. That's really hard to say without it coming out weird. Fig slitter. He slits them early. That makes it expand and become soft. So there's more fruit there. So the poor get to eat more. More fruit is produced around each seed. The fruit that people that have money don't want, he is making better for those who can't afford anything else. He is doing something positive and active. It may not seem like a big thing, but to those who eat that because they have nothing else, it is a big thing. And he also tends the herds. In other words, I have a life. I could be going about my job instead of giving away a week of vacation to help at camp. I could be sleeping in instead of making it a point to get here a little bit early to get fellowship time together. I could be doing something much more pleasant with my time if I wasn't putting in hours and a week of strong activity for Vacation Bible School, if I wasn't coming forward to collect offering, if I wasn't picking up after my room, if I wasn't keeping an ear out for the suffering and the struggling and making sure they know they're not forgotten, if I wasn't visiting a nursing home and saying, oh, those places make me so depressed, I don't like to go there. But Amos has left behind the work he likes to do and he's good at. And in their midst now is a real, live, rootin', tootin' prophet. In our midst are so many prophets. In our midst are so many miracles. In our midst, every person that walks through our doors, our ancient doors, our doors which are in a direct lineage from the tent flap where the Ark of the Covenant traveled in the desert, where the temple was built, and where ancient churches where God is praised and is praised still, everybody walking through those doors is a miracle. It's live, it's real. Open the doors, the ancient doors of our heart, Lord, so we recognize how lucky we are we came here today. Because whatever happened today may never happen again. And whoever we shake hands with today, we may not see next week. And whatever blessing we have the opportunity to give may never come to the palm of our hand again to give. All they want to do is chase Amos off by telling them the truth and giving them one more chance. Don't chase God away in your life. Don't chase the living Lord from your heart. Don't chase the children out of our way in worship and in church because they might be a little inconvenient. And please recognize that despite the aim and goal you have simply of crossing from point A to point B in our church may be interrupted, let it interrupt you. Be blessed. Be a miracle. Because God has given you the ability to do far more than you give God credit for. William Reinhardt, one of our own, had to live in Europe in order to be able to do the things that God had blessed him with, to use the talents he had. Let us not force those who are so talented in our midst, the prayer warriors, the blessing givers, the singers, those who play musical instruments, live and in person, to go elsewhere. You've heard testimonies this morning about camp and other things. This sort of thing is happening all around us. Amos is in our midst, preaching justice and peace, and the fact that we've used up 2 of our strikes. Let's all hit a home run. Amen.